This gameplay video is brought to you by very generous patron Shuffles. Mondrak versus Winota with a one-lander, no good. Into another one-lander against Winota, we're not going to do too well here. Okay, two-lander with a Soul Ring we'll try. Getting rid of two cards, it'll have to be Generous Gift, and it pains me, but the Lightning Greaves. We don't even have double white available to us here. And we are on the play, so we don't get to draw into another card. Throw out the Soul Ring. Turn 1 Isamaru from our opponent. Note that this is the multiplayer version of this deck. Just edited it a tiny little bit, but obviously not well enough. Go for the Smothering Tithe that we just drew into, try and fix our white mana. They're not going to be able to pay for the treasure token. We can get down both Anointed Procession and the Smothering Tithe, that would be really good. Our opponent hits us for 2 with the Isamaru, and then just passes with 2 mana held up, so maybe has a sword or something for the Mondrak, but Mondrak makes more sense here. Yeah, because we're going to be able to block. I don't trust that our opponent won't get down a Winota next turn. Well, we get 2 treasure tokens out of it at least. And there we see a Chrome Mox from our opponents, so yeah, likely to see Winota here. Or at least they would have been able to get down Winota, not sure if they want to, into our 4-4. Throwing down an Aven Mind Sensor underneath it, and yep, get down the Winota, so I'm glad I played my commander here. Swinging in the Isamaru will get them into a human. And that gets them into a Banisher Priest. So we'll put that into our command zone, it's indestructible, wouldn't have helped it there. Okay, another land, it is a tap land unfortunately, so could get some blockers in the way with Captain of the Watch, I suppose. But I'd like to keep making mana with the Anointed Procession, so we will go for that here. Wouldn't be against drawing into a board wipe at this point, of course. Eidolon of Rhetoric. So hitting us with a non-human, they're going to trigger the Winota again. And this time getting into Geist Honored Monk will bring in some tokens, so that is a 7-7. Taking a massive hit here. So down we go to 19. 3 cards left in hand, still holding up that 2 mana. Okay, a Skrelv's Hide will help us next turn. So maybe it's just Captain of the Watch, we challenge our opponent to have removal. We'll get twice as many tokens here of course, thanks to the enchantment. They will go down to 1/1s if our opponent manages to take out the Captain of the Watch. Iroas got a victory, going to make it much more difficult for us to block. And of course, thanks to the spirits being in play now, they do trigger Winota a whole bunch more times. So it just shows how powerful Winota is, even with our fast mana. I mean, we did struggle a little bit with our opening hands, but even with the fast mana, we're not going to contend with it here. And there we see double strikes, so we go down this turn. Because I'm just going to take the damage, I think. Seeing Grand Abolisher as well. Another buff with Krovax. So we'll take the damage and get on with another game, I think. Just drawing into a couple of lands off the top. Playing against Kenrith this time, and we actually have mana in our opening hand, even if that is very slow. I bet Kenrith's going to have ramp in the opening few turns here, but we're on the draw at least. Could get into some. I am asking for more casual games here, because this isn't a spiky deck in the least. White Sun's Twilight is nowhere near where we want to be, so just drop a Plains. Our opponent goes for Talisman into Opt, scry and draw 1. 3 cards left in hand only over there, which bodes well for us. Alright, and that panned out quite nicely. An Arcane Signet on our turn 2. Means it wasn't a dead turn for us. Also means we could go for Mondrak next turn, although that's pretty risky. Would be the worst thing to get spot removal out of our opponent's hand though. A Farseek. Okay, there's a Halo Fountain. I think... Yeah, if our opponent goes for a counterspell or something here, it wouldn't be the worst for us, so we'll just go for the Mondrak, get the counterspell out of their hand. Otherwise we can just start wailing on them with a 4-4. Kenrith the Returned into play. There we see a land tax. Our opponent's on 5 lands, could be, or 4 lands, could be on 5 next turn. So we could start triggering that. We'll go for the Halo Fountain here, so that we can chump block the Kenrith if it swings in towards us. Actually totally mistapped my mana there, should have put generic mana into the Halo Fountain, we could have had down the land tax. And there's that land, so we would have been triggering land tax. And they decide to draw a card with the Kenrith. And yep, deciding to swing in here. Oh, and I thought you had to tap down a creature with this, you actually have to untap one. Wow, making mistakes all over here, so we're taking 5 commander damage. At least I'll be able to swing in with the Mondrak next turn here though, and then actually be able to activate the Halo Fountain. Alright, we draw into a land anyway, so drop that. We will go for the Mentor of the Meek, and then we've got mana to go for Halo Fountain and the Mentor of the Meek's ability, so we'll get down the land tax now, not being punished here. Could have held off on the land tax so that we can draw 2 cards with Mentor of the Meek, that might have been a better idea. But once we've got tokens, we'll be able to use the tokens to activate the Halo. I don't think it says non-token, does it? No. Just untap a tapped creature. So drawing a card with the Kenrith again. Our opponent's going pretty slow, up to 5 cards in hand though. And there is a Talisman. And our opponent not swinging in this time, so we untap our commander, making a couple of tokens, triggers, Mentor of the Meek of course. So we say yes, and can't afford the other one, cleared a land off the top. And our opponent does control more lands than us now, so we'll get to fill up with the land tax. And you can see why I held on to the shuffle effect. If we get into Scroll Rack, we'll be able to dump all these lands on top and trade them out, and then shuffle them away. Always like to hold on to my shuffle effects. But of course, you never believe how much that happens. We go for land tax, get all 3 lands, and then draw into a land anyway. So we can start drawing more cards with the Mentor of the Meek here. Let's swing in with 1 citizen token, and then we'll be able to go for Halo Fountain before they block and destroy it. Our opponent was holding before combat there, so I'm not sure if he had something for us. So we'll untap the attacking creature, make a couple more citizen tokens, and now we've got a means of making Mondrak indestructible as well. I'll pay for this with the white mana first, just in case the Nesting Grounds becomes relevant with what we draw. It does not. So let's hold on to as much white mana as possible in that case. And that is a generous gift for the commander, which I'll do during their turn, I think. I'll make them put mana into their ability. And our opponent, strangely, lets the damage through. Well, it's only 1 damage, but they might as well have taken a token away from us. The number of creatures we have is relevant with the Halo Fountain. And Kenrith just drawing a card again. Managing to consistently make mana at least. But as long as they stay a land ahead of us, we're going to keep triggering this land tax. And drawing another card again. Our opponent's going to have to start doing more than this. So now that he's sort of wasted his turn, in a way, we'll go for the generous gift. Bought ourselves a turn there with the commander being in play. So now they'll have to spend 7 mana next turn getting it out, and that's obviously less time for them and less mana to put into the abilities. We will say yes to the tax again. And okay, a Grand Crescendo is good to hold up. Throw down a basic, and yeah, might as well swing in with the Mondrak here. We can untap it with the Halo Fountain, which will of course make us a couple of citizen tokens again. Draws us with Mentor of the Meek again. And okay, Spawning Pit might be useful to have in play, but we've got the Grand Crescendo anyway, which I'm probably going to put more mana into to make the Halo Fountain more relevant. And our opponent takes the damage, as you would expect, so we'll hold off on the Grand Crescendo until the end of our opponent's turn. Grand Crescendo makes a bunch of tokens, by the way. Okay, Jeweled Lotus from our opponent means that they can get out the Kenrith again pretty easily. So in he comes again, can put mana into drawing a card again if he wants to. Okay, I was joking, but he actually does, so yeah. Once again leaving up the Rakdos mana. I'm not sure what he's hunting for exactly. There's a Tendo Ice Bridge. So a bit of a weird game this one. We will tap out into the Grand Crescendo. So that's 4 mana into X, or 3 mana into X, but we'll get 6 tokens out of this of course, thanks to the Mondrak. If our opponent's got spot removal, then now's the time to use it, but they do not, so we've got 6, 7, 8, 12, 13 and 14 creatures in play. Getting all 3 lands with the land tax again for deck thinning. We draw into another land anyway. So we'll play Knight of the White Orchid. It's not useless after all, although we could have made more creatures with Call the Coppercoats anyway. Might as well draw a card with the Mentor. There is Lauren of the Third Path. So we actually have to wait another turn here because we have to untap the creatures, which means we have to swing in with them. Yeah, none of the creatures have vigilance, thankfully, so let's go for the Spawning Pit. We can make some tokens in response to a board wipe at least, just in case they manage to do something about our board here. Might as well trade out a citizen token for another token. we're going to lose this one, but we'll make 2. And then we'll pay into Mentor of the Meek, because we're still holding up a mana for the Mondrak that we can give it Indestructible with. Alright, finally getting into some other stuff. We can get down that Sol Ring, because that'll pay the generic cost on the Mondrak. And again, decided to take the 1 damage. This is, well, I asked for a casual game, and this is what we're getting, but not sure what my opponent's aim is here. You'll never guess what Kenrith's doing. Drawing a card again, up to 7 cards in hand. And again, we see another decent card, a Sylvan Library, so they do have good cards in the deck. It's just not really doing too much of anything, unfortunately. Alright, so I'll say no to the land tax here. I'll try and win this game as fast as possible. Cathar's Crusade. Yeah, we've already dragged our feet enough here, so get down the Myrel to make sure our opponent can't do anything during our turn. And then we turn everything in sideways. We're going to try and win with the Halo Fountain here. So at 5 mana, untap 15 creatures, which will be 10 here, 4 here, and we'll untap our commander. And there we go, Halo Fountain winning us the game. So that was, yeah, pretty weird game. I asked for a casual game and I got one, but pretty one-sided, not particularly satisfying, so I'll try one more. Playing against Ixhel this time, and yeah, that's a decent sum of mana. We should be able to ramp out pretty quickly, so definitely keeping that. We are on the play. Could have gone for a Mana Crypt on turn 1 into the Resolute Reinforcements, but obviously want to do that with Mondrak in play if I can. See an early Bajuka Borg. I don't think we've got too much graveyard interaction anyway, so good that our opponent gets that out of the way. Okay, a Mimic Vat for us to make some more tokens potentially. Crack the Flooded Strand. Crack the Flooded Strand, get down the Mana Crypt. That can take us into Solemn Simulacrum. And then we just pray that our opponent doesn't have any means of blowing up the Mana Crypt. A land next turn wouldn't be terrible either. Well, they've got green mana. Okay, and it's a Bloom Tender from our opponent, so should be able to drop a land and get down the commander next turn. Okay, and a land is good. Fabled Passage will be able to bring in an untapped Plains. So I think we still go for the Mondrak here. If our opponent goes for the commander, then he won't be able to hold up mana for removing Mondrak, I don't think. And hopefully we'll be able to go for the Resolute Reinforcements at the end of the turn. So Solemn swinging in. Seeing Sylvan Library now, so just green mana available to my opponent. Missing a land drop feels pretty bad, but I'm sure they'll get into one next turn. Oh, and in my talking I forgot to get down the Resolute Reinforcements. Ugh. Well, it's alright, we'll get down the Mirror Entity. Yeah, it would have been Mirror Entity into the Mimic Vat here, but I don't think we're going to be getting rid of the Bloom Tender anyway, so not too desperate to get that down. Wouldn't have gone for Everent Hoplite while the Mirror Entity isn't in play, because obviously the more white pips we see the better. So again we'll hold up the reinforcements, and we'll actually be able to have Mondrak's ability online this way as well. So our opponent taking the first 4 points of commander damage, going down to 31. Sylvan Library, our opponent doesn't take any life to that, curiously. So we see a Strip Mine, just a bunch of basics for us at the moment. There's the Ixhel though, a turn too late, or a turn later than our opponent would have liked, I should say. So let's play the Resolute Reinforcements while I actually remember to do that. And then are we going to go for Hour of Reckoning, so that we can send our opponent to the Dark Ages with regards to permanents on board? Because if we are, I'll just sacrifice the creatures now to the Mondrak. Yeah, I suppose we can do that. Kills 2 birds with 1 stone. We draw a card, and we get an indestructible counter on our commander. So Mirror Entity's going to die anyway, as is the Solemn. And there we see Elspeth, Sun's Champion. So yeah, that's going to be good after a board wipe. Okay, Divine Visitation along with the Elspeth is very, very good. So we'll play out the Hour of Reckoning, tap this down definitely because it's going to die to it. And then we can play out the... I suppose we could play out the Mimic Vat first actually, couldn't we? So let's do that. Can put the Bloom Tender under it. Putting a commander under this isn't all that useful because your opponent can choose to take it from exile into the command zone. And this does mean that we have to tap down all of our creatures to go for the Hour of Reckoning, but destroying all non-token creatures, excluding the Mondrak, which is indestructible. So Mimic Vat triggers a few times. We could put, actually, the token generator under it, couldn't we? Yeah, that one's the Bloom Tender, the Commander, and the Resolute Reinforcements. I think I'll say yes to that one. And then whenever we activate this, we're going to get 2 token copies of the Resolute Reinforcements, each coming down with 2 tokens. So hopefully our opponent sticks this out. Our opponent deciding to take the life here to the Sylvan Library, which he should do. Fable Passage will come in untapped. Alright, a Sword of Truth and Justice from our opponent. With no creature in place, there are a couple of turns from that thing being relevant. Probably should have got down a creature there if they could have managed that. Now what I should do here is get down the Elspeth Sun's Champion, but I really don't want my opponent to scoop. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for the more fun play of the Mimic Vat, and we can play and crack a Wayfarer's Bauble during this next turn cycle as well. So we'll play the Mimic Vat, brings in a couple of Resolute Reinforcements like I said, and then they each bring in 2 tokens with them, so that's some nice value for us, especially if we care about the token count. Wayfarer's Bauble. The tokens do have the mana pip on them as well, which is relevant with the Reverent Hoplite. So could put another indestructible counter on the Mondrak if we wanted to move indestructible counters around, which is relevant. We'll just turn in sideways here. If we make a land next turn, then we're going to be able to go for Divine Visitation and activate the Mimic Vat, which will be really good. And yeah, there's every chance that we could draw into a land. We'll get one from the Bauble, of course. Our opponent has just shuffled, so looking at new cards on top with the Sylvan Library. Probably needs to get really aggressive with that now if he thinks he's going to lose to us going wide anyway. Needs to try and find a board wipe. And we see Phyresis Outbreak. Each opponent gets a poison counter, and each creature your opponent's control gets -1/-1 for each poison counter, so yeah, that wipes out our soldier tokens. We'll just go for the Bauble now. And our opponent will have something to proliferate at this point that will slowly get rid of the Mondrak. So we're just hoping that we get into a land at this point. If we don't, I'll probably just drop the Elspeth, seeing as how our opponent's starting to fight back now. Stop treading water. And we do keep losing mana crypt flips as well. Alright, there's mana at least, so that can be Arcane Signet. So we're ready for the Divine Visitation play next turn, which is obviously really good with Elspeth. Drop that into play. Go for the plus, get 6 soldier tokens thanks to the Mondrak. Oh, I thought this thing put minus counters, it's just -1/-1 for the turn. Okay, so Mondrak doesn't have a minus counter to proliferate like I thought it would. Swinging at our opponent, sending them to 12 commander damage. Yeah, and that's enough to have our opponent scoop it, unfortunately. Fair enough, didn't have the best luck with mana that game. Obviously what we're doing next turn is just Divine Visitation, and then all we have to do is plus with the Elspeth, and we're making 6 4/4 Flying Angels every turn, so pretty convincing one there, but a fun showing of Mondrak nonetheless. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.